Hi, I'd like to talk a bit about this music video which I animated. It's for a song called Asymptomatrix by New York-based jazz musician Nick Marks. This was a special project for me because it's the closest I've come to recreating the kind of thing I see in my head when I'm listening to music. Nick reached out to me earlier this year and asked if I'd be interested in working on a project together. He gave me some of his music to listen to, and kind of reminded me a bit of stuff like Snarky Puppy and Sungazer, stuff that I'm really into, so I was like, yeah, this'll be cool, I'm keen. His ideas for the video were to combine something like the Matrix code and flying into an infinite black hole. He also wanted some kind of flying object that represented the saxophone in the song. Immediately I had a few ideas of what this could look like. A bit of Douglas Trumbull-esque effects, a bit of audio surf, and other shiny, vaporwavy CGI type of stuff. I also had an idea for what technique I wanted to use to get that sense of flying into the infinite. In After Effects, I made a composition with a bunch of particles and abstract scrolling patterns, all zooming along in one direction. Then I made a simple 3D tunnel shape in Blender, imported that into After Effects using Element 3D, and set the composition with all those abstract shapes and particles as the texture for that tunnel. I could then twist and turn that tunnel shape around using distortion settings in Element. And when the camera is inside the tunnel, it creates this illusion of an infinite twisting and turning tunnel made from stardust and matrixy computer stuff. Here's an early test animation that I did for this effect. The next thing I did was design an object to represent the saxophone. Initially had the idea of using musical symbols like the treble clef and abstracting that into a sort of spaceship kind of shape. But I ended up simplifying it just so it didn't distract too much from the already complex background visuals. Nick really wanted the animation of this object to synchronize with the saxophone in some way. After a lot of experimentation, I decided that the best way to do this was to make it transform into this wild, colourful shape, and move in more erratic ways when the saxophone plays. I got sent the saxophone performance as a separate audio recording, and converted the audio to keyframes in After Effects. This way I could trigger particular settings based on the timing and volume of the saxophone performance. The movement of the object is almost entirely based on the wiggle expression, which randomizes its position. By linking a few other objects and expressions together, I was able to make it rotate and sway around naturally with the random movement, so it looks like it's actually flying. I was also able to link the keyframes from that saxophone performance so that the object would transform in time to it. The next thing I did was design this city-like environment for the ending. I wanted this to not feel too obviously like a real city. Like maybe these objects could just be bits of circuitry or musical instruments or symbols or something like that, not actual buildings. I was kind of inspired by this shot from the intro to the 90s cartoon Reboot. Again, I used Blender to design the structures for the city. I'm pretty new to 3D, so I intentionally chose an aesthetic based around early 3D animation. This meant I could keep the models very simple. I think it ties in well with that whole matrixy theme. Again, using Element, I made this cityscape by generating a whole bunch of these structures as randomly scattered particles. This really pushes my computer to the limit. It took several days for me to render these shots. Finally, I made these sections. The rings are again particles made in Element 3D, but this time set up in a cylinder shape instead of a grid. One of the parts I'm most proud of is this bit here, where the object jumps up these ramps, synchronized in time with the pauses in the song. This is because this is something that I pictured very clearly in my mind's eye when I listened to the song for the first few times. At these points, the tunnel texture goes transparent to form the gaps, and then I had to line those gaps up with the timing of those parts in the song. Took a bit of trial and error, but obviously eventually I got there, and like I say, I'm really happy with this part. Of course, there are thousands of tiny little details and creative decisions that go into making an animation like this, but if I went through everything, then this video would be hours long, so these are just the main concepts, the main ideas. But if you have any questions about stuff in the video that I didn't talk about, then feel free to ask me in the comments. So yeah, please go check out the full video if you haven't already, a link is in the description. And if you like this kind of cinematic, electronic jazz fusion kind of sound, then I definitely recommend checking out more of Nick's music on Spotify and YouTube and whatever streaming thing that you like to use. A big thanks to Nick for the opportunity to work with him, and thank you for watching.